This is your crash course on how to use the paint sprayer. So here we are out of the junkyard. Let me first tell you what about the sprayer. This is your spraying unit. It's dirty from the paint of 100 jobs. This is your spraying unit here. Out in the front here, this hosey thing here, that's your dipstick. That's what you drop in your paint bucket. This other hose, that's your primer hose. I'll go over what to do with those a little later. You also have an electrical cord. It's not very long, so I would also bring with you an extension cord because it only goes about 5 feet. And you got your spray hose. On your paint sprayer, this little switch here switches from priming to painting. If it's sideways, that means it's priming. Straight up and down means painting. And if you forget and you can look through the paint, it actually tells you right there. This is your on and off switch, and this is your pressure twisty thingy. It changes the pressure on the hose. At the end of the hose, you have your spray gun. You'll notice that whoever used it last was painting something purple. Inside this handle here, there's a filter. This is your handle trigger there. This is your trigger lock. It kind of, if you zoom in there, it kind of keeps you from spraying if you don't. If you turn it anyway, like that. This is your spray guard and spray tip. The orange part's the guard. As the spray comes out, the two side pieces kind of keep it, the edges crisp. This is your spray tip. In case you wanted to know, they come in different sizes. This one here is a let's see, that's a 515. The first number is basically the width. If you double the first number, the width of that is kind of the width of your spray pattern. So 5 would be about a 10-inch fan. 15 is the measurement of how much paint is coming through the hose. And so for regular paints, you like a 515, 517 is good. With a stain, you usually want a less flowage and a smaller fan. So that's about the sprayer itself. And next we'll get into, before we get into that, some other things you'd like to have around that are nice. A couple of buckets of water. Obviously you're going to need some paint, either in gallon buckets or 5-gallon buckets. Other things that are handy to have, that's the oil that goes in the sprayer. Something to clean up, that's a scrubby sponge, some paint thinner. You're going to need some sort of wrenches, either a crescent wrench or something to pull the pieces and parts off. You got and some cleanup supplies. So those are handy to have around as well. So next we're going to go into how to get the sprayer ready to paint. Okay, I parked the camera so I can use both hands. We're going to go over getting the paint sprayer ready to paint. Now, like I mentioned before, it's nice to have a couple of buckets because right now the hose is full of water. And you're going to get it full of paint, but between the paint and the water, you're going to have watery paint, which really isn't good for anything. And so the first thing you got your buckets of water, you got your paint stirred up and ready to go, you got your sprayer plugged in. First thing you'll do is put your dipstick with this little filter on the bottom, and you can unscrew that and clean it off if you'd like. Put the dipstick with the filter into the paint bucket. So the first thing you need to do is get the water out of the system and replace it with paint. And use that by using the primer hose here. So switch your hose, your spray setting, to primer. I'll bring the camera over here so you can kind of see. And then I'm going to turn the paint sprayer on. It's going to start chugging. Hold on, I'm going to stop and see if you could actually hear the volume. Okay, here we are. We have the dipstick in the paint bucket. We got our buckets of water. The first thing we're doing is going to cycle the water out of the machine into the watery paint's going to go into this blue bucket here. So when I turn it on, you're going to hear a kick, And you'll notice you kind of get a sense of the sprayer when it's running paint and pressurizing the hose. It's a little lower pitched and a little bit slower. And when it starts to run out of paint or there's something wrong with the system, it'll be higher and faster. For now, I'm just going to turn her on. We'll give it a wing it here and see how it goes. Primer's in the bucket. So you see water coming out of the hose, or paint's coming to replace it. In a minute, you should see paint start squirting out here. And when you do, you hear the sound of it change there? Oh, there you go. Okay, so now you got paint in your machine. So let that drip. Then you want to put your primer hose. Just dunk it in your paint here. Now this little tie here is just to help the primer hose stay where it's supposed to. So it helps if you loop it. Sorry, it's hard to do with one hand. Loop it through that, and then dump it in the paint bucket. It has a greater tendency to stay where it's supposed to. Okay, let me... I should camera with the left hand. Okay. Hold on. Okay, there. So your primer hose is buried with your dipstick and your paint. The next step is to do the same thing. We're going to cycle the water out of the hose. Right now I've taken the spray tip off of that because it's a lot easier to manage. You end up spraying everywhere. And so I'm going to hold down the... Hold on, my trigger guard's on. You can tell this is a pretty classy video production. Okay, so there should probably is pressure in the hose, so if you pull the trigger before you turn the on button on, and the pressure won't build up, and it makes it a little easier. So I'm going to turn the machine on, and you'll hear it cycling water through the hose, and eventually it'll turn to paint. And you also notice it'll spit when it's water, and when it's paint, it'll kind of turn into a steadier stream. Okay, go ahead, listen. So that's water. In a minute here, it's going to turn to paint. Oh, there it goes. Okay, now you're squirting paint. Okay, now you've got paint in the machine and paint in the hose. You'll notice that the paint kind of takes out like a good quarter of the bucket of paint because it's filling up this big old hose. So the next thing you're going to want to do, I'm going to put you back on the car. Okay. So the next thing you want to do, once you're, make sure all your bits and pieces are clean, you're going to put your spray tip on your gun. This just screws on. It tightens on. You have to kind of plan ahead. It's usually easiest to have when this finally gets tightened, to have the spray tip sideways. That'll create nice sideways here. It'll create a nice flat fan when you're spraying. And that's when you're going to need a wrench to tighten this on tight. Got a wrench here. Okay, so that's fairly straight enough for our purposes here. Now there's still pressure in the hose, and so in addition to getting the water out and cycling paint through, you also want some sort of garbage cardboard to start just making sure your spray is looking nice. So right now your paint sprayer is all geared up, ready to go. The next thing we're going to go over is how to start spraying, how to fine-tune the paint sprayer and make sure it's spraying nice. Like I said, you're going to want some sort of garbage material so you don't go and spray your walls or your doors right away. This is going to be our garbage material for now. And when I spray, you want to go in smooth motions. Well, I'll take a step back. Before you start spraying, you want to make sure that it's the right pressure coming out of the system. That's what this knob here is for. If you screw it down clockwise, it's going to increase the pressure. Screwing it counterclockwise will decrease the pressure. You want it so when the spray comes out, it's going to create kind of a fan. If the pressure is too high, it's going to be a lot of paint in the middle and less on the outsides. If the pressure is too low, it's going to be, you're going to have big lines on the outsides and not as much in the middle. You want to tune the sprayer so it's about even all the way through. So you don't have thick in the middle, you don't have thick on the outside. Let's give this a test. Oh, got to turn it on. And, oh, it's another good point. When you turn it on, you'll hear it churn. When it stops, that means the system's pressurized. Oh, this is a good note here. Did you hear it kind of started to pressurize, but then didn't? What you need to do is kind of turn it on, and then switch it back and forth between prime and paint. Okay, so now your hose is all turned on, and while you're spraying, you're going to hear it chug every once in a while. That's just bringing some more paint into the system. So now we're going to test our pressure here. I think it could use a little bit more. It's hard to tell from back there. Okay, that looks decent. Well, maybe a little bit less. Okay, that's I think good enough for our illustration purposes. This really doesn't matter. So once you have the pressure set, you've got your paint spray ready to go. You're ready to start painting. So hopefully you have everything in your house prepped and ready to go. Now when you're spraying, really it's not rocket science, but there is a little bit of technique to make sure that the spray goes on looking nice. One of the biggest things you don't want to do is to pile on too much paint. You're going to start to get drips, especially on a smooth finish. And so you never want to hold the sprayer in one spot. You always want to be moving it so it doesn't pile up. Also, you want to be careful as you're coming back and forth. A lot of times I will let go of the trigger as I go back and forth, because if you don't, sometimes it piles up when your arm's switching directions. The other thing you don't want to do is to spray it in an archway like so, because then it piles up in the middle, then it starts to blow off in nowhere here. You want to stay about equidistant, about 12 to 18 inches from the surface of spraying. You go back and forth, and you're going to paint it on up. Are there any other tips for painting? Mostly that's it. Try not to pile it up. Depending on where you're painting. If you're painting something with slats or grooves, sometimes you want to come at an angle this way and then come back at an angle that way to hit your grooves at different directions. You can do the same thing if you wanted to go up and down. Tilt it up a bit, tilt it down a bit. Still keep the distance from the wall the same, just angle your sprayer a little bit differently. If you're doing door trim, sometimes you want to hit the face of the trim and come up the side, but once again, make sure you don't load too much on there. You'll start to get drips, and then it just creates a mess, and it doesn't look as nice. So that's pretty much what it is for the actual spraying process. I'm going to take the dipstick out just to tell you what it sounds like when it starts to run out of paint. See if I can do this without making a mess. Grab my newspaper here. Okay. Now what's going to happen here is it starts to run out of paint. It's going to start sucking in air. Well, that's going to take a long time and waste a lot of paint. Maybe is there an easier way to explain this? Maybe I'll turn it on prime. You'll hear it that way. Okay. When it starts to chug like that constantly, that means there's not any paint coming in. So what you want to do is get a new paint bucket, or if it's a 5-gallon bucket, you just need, well, either way, you need new paint. And once you get new paint, you want to turn it back onto prime to fill up the system again until the paint starts coming out. But there's no water in the system, so you can put your prime line back in. and it changes sounds. Sometimes switching it back and forth helps. Okay, now it's coming out. Now you're all good to go again. So that's how you you cycle your paint through and make sure you got paint in your system and in your hose. So then you just paint away, make sure there's paint in the system. Like I say, if it's not sucking in, kind of turn it back towards prime and paint, that little switch on the front side here. The next thing we're going to go over is how to clean up and clean out the system so there's no paint and it's all ship shape good to go. And it's just the backwards of whatever we were doing before. So go ahead and take your spray tip off. And for now, wrong direction. You can just dump it in one of your buckets of water. This is where 2 buckets of water really comes in handy. You don't necessarily need to, but I think it's helpful. So I'm going to dump this in the dirty water bucket. It just has painty water in it. And the first thing you want to do is take your dipstick out of the paint, put it in your dirty water blankets or your bucket so it starts sucking water through the system. It's going to be covered in paint, so I just wash it off a little bit here. And there's a lot of paint in the hose still, so if you don't want to waste your paint, you want to pull all the paint out of the hose and put it back in the bucket. You don't want to spray any water in there, so keep your dirty water bucket close here, and you got your paint bucket. The first thing you're going to do is take it out of the hose. You can put your primer hose in here too. We'll get to that in a minute here. Okay, so now you've taken the spray tip off because you don't want to spray it in here. Also, I would turn the machine off and point it into the bucket, kind of against the side, and you point it straight down in. It's going to squirt out and splash everywhere. Pull the trigger while the machine's off to release the pressure. And then while you're holding on the trigger, turn the machine back on, and you'll start to see it squirt paint into the bucket. And it's going to keep squirting paint, and you can tell it switches to water because the look and the sound change. It'll start to spit a little bit more. I'm still holding down the trigger. Okay, now I can tell it's starting to spit instead of just flow. So I'm going to do the same thing. Now that it's starting to get water through here, I'm going to release the pressure, pull the trigger ahead of time, and turn it on and let it cycle some dirty water through here. So right now I've got water coming, dirty water coming in through the dipstick and through the hose. You also want to get the primer to run, turn it to the primer switch and let it run through that way as well to get the paint out of there. So it's got some dirty water in it, kind of cycling through, and it's hard to tell what's dirty water and what's paint. That's where the clean bucket kind of comes in handy. So next, all the paint is done, so I'm going to put the paint out of the way. I'm going to get my clean bucket over here. So now that I have my dipstick all kind of washed off, so it doesn't dirty up my clean water as much, it probably will a little bit. But if I can avoid it, that's the best. So I'm going to put it in the clean water bucket. Now it's pulling clean water out. I'm going to pull clean water out of this bucket and flush it through this bucket. And so if you turn it on primer, it's going to cycle it through the machine. If you turn it on sprayer and hold it down, it's going to cycle through the sprayer. Now I'll show you a tip here in a minute, but first I'm just going to let it cycle through some water. So it's squirting out some water. You turn it on hose, you can squirt it out that way too. Now here's your tip. Just makes it easier to clean this out so you don't have to sit and hold it all day. Let me bring you over here. Okay, so remember that lock on the handle here? So if you look underneath here, sorry, I started to do it with one hand. That little nub there, focus, that little nub right there is what locks it if you turn it back towards the back of the handle. Let me step on it here. Okay, focus. So if you turn that nub back, it braces against the back and keeps you from pulling the trigger. You can also, if you turn to the other direction, if you press the trigger down, you can see that little ledge right there. Sorry, having a hard time focusing. Yeah, I put it in the light. Okay, there's a little right there. Inside there. If you pull the trigger, whoa! Pressure in the system. Okay, pressure's out. If you pull the trigger and twist that little piece down, so now it's your little nub is pushing against that front thing there. Now the gun is stuck on. And so being it's stuck on, it's going to keep squirting. Hang the bucket on the side there. Make sure the prime is squirting into the bucket here. And then turn the machine to prime. So with the machine on prime, the handle is stuck in the on position, and the primer cord is jammed in the bucket. Hold on a second. I'm sure it stays in there. Okay. So you got your primer cord in, you got your handle stuck on. Go ahead and turn it on. Now you'll see it's coming through both. It's coming through the primer hose and the painter, and it's coming through pretty brown. So it's pulling in this clean water from the clean water bucket, and it's spitting it out as dirty water. And basically you want to keep cycling the clean water out into the dirty water until you get nice clean water coming out both the primer hose and the gun. Right now it's still looking pretty brownish. Jam that baby in there. So you're just going to let that run, and then once it's running through clear, then you're ready just to clean out your other parts. Okay, I've cycled a couple of buckets of clean water through, and the water is coming through looking pretty clear now. Hard to see on the shadows. Anyway, it's coming through pretty clear. So after you've cycled enough clean water through to make sure everything's clean, your last step is to clean off all the parts. Like I say, you can unscrew this nozzle tip and clean all the paint out of there. And the other part you need to clean up. This is usually pretty good. Just rinse off there. The spray tip. Where did I put it? Oh! I probably dumped it where I dumped my bucket. That's a common mistake, because I remember I put my spray tip in the dirty water bucket. Then I went and dumped it, so I got to go back and find it. Anyway, that's the orange tip with the spray thing. I'll go get it and I'll show you. Okay, I found my spray tip. It comes in two pieces. The tip and the guard. I forgot to tell you. You'll see this kind of is shaped like an arrow. I'm going to set the camera down here for a minute so I can show you. Okay, so here's your spray tip. This tip gets inserted in here. When the arrow is pointing out, that means you're set to spray, and it actually locks into position right there. If you ever get a clog, you can turn that backwards, and it just squirts out in a stream. Then you turn it back, and it squirts into a spray. And the reason you may get a clog is if you're painting for a while, and you're ready to take a break and mask something or anything. Sometimes the paint will get dried up here. One of the other nice things about keeping a bucket around with dirty water or clean water is when I'm taking a break from spraying, but I'm not ready to clean it out yet, what I'll do is I'll just drop my my spray gun into the bucket of water. It keeps everything fresh, and then when you're ready to spray it out again, spray it just once or twice to get all the water out, then you're good to go again. So like I say, the last thing you're going to need to do is clean off your tips, clean all the paint out of there, so next time we're ready to use it, it's all ship-shape, ready to go. Other than that, that's pretty much how to use the paint sprayer. Good luck.